how do you get back to your A game when things are not going good?
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's like when things are not going good, like or if I made like a few mistakes, or doesn't matter if it need to be mistake. It's just it was a bad decision. So I called, they had better, and then I call them again, and they had better, and then I play well, but I lose, and it's like I'm thinking about the previous hands and like
a couple things. Number one exercise that I think personally is helpful for tournaments. And a friend of mine, I learned this from a guy who played 50, 100 heads up PLO. And he said, listen, like the way that I tell if I'm ready to play is I just ask myself, like, how am I going to feel if I sit down and I lose, 2 or 3 buy-ins in the first 10 minutes of my session? And if I'm going to feel like I want to fucking jump off a bridge, then maybe I'm not ready to play today. That's basically it. Like if you feel like, okay, like if I sit down and I just bust a few things, if you just put the idea in your mind, say, hey, can I handle that? Because I know it's a possibility, right? And if I already present that possibility to myself, it's obviously not what I prefer, right? I don't prefer to sit down and bust like first hand of 2 different tournaments at the same time, but it can happen. And if I ask myself, if I say, okay, well, if that happens, and I'm okay with it. Then when you sit down and register, whatever happens is better than that usually. Making peace with the maximum you can lose in a day. Like you don't know that in cash games. You have to like put a stop loss if you want to know that. But in tournaments, you know how many buy-ins you're going to fire. Okay, I'm playing 4K worth of buy-ins today. So if today is a really bad day and I have 0 cashes, okay, 4K is what I'm going to lose today. Am I okay with losing 4K today? Yes? Okay. Or if it's 8K or whatever the number is for you. But like making peace with the maximum amount that you can lose in a day and just understanding, okay, like that could happen and it could happen very quickly.
I don't think it's related to the money. Like it's more like to the making the wrong decisions and not doing well. Like I was running like last month, I was having probably the best month. It was the best month in my cash games tables ever. And starting this month, I had like minus 80% ROI on tournaments. So it's like, but it's still like a small amount that I won last month. It's not like about the money, it's just the failure that I keep getting crushed and keep losing and keep making decisions that are, I think, should be probably good, or like at least sometimes good, but not always bad.
Well, I'm sure you understand that like sometimes you make a good decision and the guy's top of his range, right? So like when you call and the guy shows you that he had it, it doesn't mean it was wrong.
Yeah, of course.
When we play tournaments, we have a lot of tables. It can be like, we kind of, if we're not careful, we know that objectively, but we can subconsciously or accidentally just kind of think like, oh, like I called and he had it, that was a mistake. Whereas like, not necessarily. Like it's a very good chance you called and he had it, and you have a hand you should call and he has enough bluffs that you should call, but he just wasn't bluffing this time. And like, you're not a fucking mind reader, you know what I mean? So like, you will lose pots by calling and getting shown better hands. You will get value bet thinly against, and you will call and he had a value bet, it will happen. And if you remind yourself of that, listen, if you want to know if you made a mistake or not, how do you do that?
I mean, I take a note and like I mark the hand and look later what I'm doing.
Plug it through a solver. You put in your range, you put in his range, you put in what you put in what you think. Like you're not gonna know in the moment. So like if you ever watch like Phil Galfond play, right? And like I learned a lot from watching him play, and he'll be like, okay, Villain's in his range here. I think he has enough bluffs. I think I have a hand. Like I can't be folding in this spot. Okay, I call. Oh, okay, and he has it. All right, cool. And it's like that's how we play when we're not needy for the money. We're not needy for the result to prove something to ourselves. Like what I think is happening with you, from what I understand, is you don't play a ton of tournaments, and now you're playing some tournaments, and you're not as sure about your ability. So when you play a tournament, you would like to believe that you're a good tournament player. And when things don't go your way, this acts as evidence that one of your fears may be true, which is maybe you're not a good tournament player because you don't have the experience to know, you don't have the sample size to point to and say, hey, I'm a good tournament player. You believe based on your cash game experience that most likely you are, and based on how soft tournaments are, I'm sure you're a winning player. You may have to work on ICM or short stack play or whatever if you haven't already. But whenever this happens, doubt is doubt. Insecurity is insecurity. So if you have an event at the poker table that brings up like, am I good enough for this? That's going to bring up every memory and feeling from your entire life when you ever asked, am I good enough for something? So any rejection from a girl, any rejection in sports, in school, all the feelings you've ever had of like, am I good enough for this situation, come up when you're in a poker game and you wonder like, do I belong in this game? Am I good enough? Am I playing badly? So when you recognize that, that's what's happening. That's why I feel a burning in my stomach, because it reminds me of a burning in my stomach I had, like subconsciously it reminds me of a burning in my stomach I had, you know, when I was 12 and I had a crush on this girl in math class and then like she kissed another boy or whatever it is. But like, it's every memory you've ever had of wondering, am I good enough for where I am? And it's triggering that. And whenever you feel emotional, you can't think logically. It's very simple. Like if you are emotionally activated, the brain does not work in a logical way. And that's why it's so important to get yourself out of an emotional state and into like a calm and collected, intelligent investor kind of state. Does that make sense? So even just knowing like, oh, I'm having an emotional reaction, that's okay. Like, that's normal. It's not about this. I'm going to let that go. Like, that's the work to start to do. Every time you notice you're upset, if you get upset that you're upset, you're going to be more upset, right? You start to feel like a burning in your stomach, right? That's like a trigger. That's a really good thing to write down. Like, okay, the moment I feel that burning, okay, cool. I know that there's something happening with me right now. I'm having an emotional experience. That's awareness. That's excellent that you notice that. You notice a physical sensation. A lot of guys don't notice the physical sensations until they're sweating, until their shirt is soaked through. So you notice, okay, yeah, I'm having an emotional reaction. Okay, cool. I recognize that. And what do I know is true? How can I interject some logic, as Jared Tendler would say? All right, well, I know I haven't run these hands yet. Okay, I think I made good calls. I got shown better hands. You know, if they were thin value bets, it leads me to be a bit more curious if they were good calls or not. I'm going to find out. If you know that you're going to run the hands, if you're like, okay, I'm going to study these spots, maybe after scoop, maybe during, but at some point I'm going to look at these hands and either I won, like I played the hand well, I won EV, or I'm going to learn. If I didn't win in those hands because I made losing errors, like losing plays, and I didn't win EV, I'm going to learn from them. I'm going to put them through, and then the next time a similar spot comes up, I'm going to have more knowledge of this spot, hit villains, the types of ranges villains have, the way those ranges interplay with the range that I'm playing, and I'm going to learn something. And I'm okay with that. I'm like, if you have self-acceptance, right? I'm okay with however good I am right now. I'm playing this $1,500 tournament. I'm for sure not the best player in the tournament. I'm not better than some of these guys who play tournaments for a living and they run sims all the time and they fucking eat, breathe, and sleep poker. But I'm good enough to be plus AV and I'm much better than the fish and I can hold my own against the regs. That's what I believe about myself. I'm going to continue to believe that and I'm going to improve from the experience. Either, if I get a good result, I'm happy. I'm good enough to win. I'm good enough to have a good result. Do I have the highest EV of any player in the field? Probably not. But like, is it a good decision for me and my bankroll right now to play this tournament? I think so. So it's easy to feel this way when you know, when you're not emotional, right? It's easy to feel, to remind yourself of all these things that we know are true. What happens is when we start to feel emotional, like we don't think any of these things. We're just angry. We're just sad. We're just annoyed. We're just mad at ourselves. And in our mind, we generally have two stories, like the story of the highest self and the story of the lower self, the story of courage and the story of doubt, the story of what we know we can be and the story of our insecurities and our biggest fears of what we hope is not true about ourselves. And what we want to avoid doing is taking short-term results in poker as confirmations of either story. If you win a tournament, it doesn't mean you're like all the greatest things you would like to believe about yourself. And if you lose and go on a big downswing, it doesn't mean all your deepest fears are true either. As the Stoics say, be wary of praise and criticism because neither of them are likely true. I mean, you are who you are. You are as good as you've worked to be. That's the reality. You will make mistakes. You will sometimes not play at your best. But if you don't accept those things, if you have a very perfectionist point of view where you believe you should play your A game 100% of the time and never make mistakes, it's hard to actually get to a point where you do play your A game the vast majority of the time and make very few mistakes. Because to get to that point, you have to have a kind of matter of fact, viewpoint on when you make a mistake. Like, oh, I think I might have fucked that up. It's okay. I'm going to learn from it. But like, I'm not going to let, that's already in the past. I'm not going to let it affect the way I feel and play in the next hand, because that would cost me even more EP. Like, I'm going to cut my losses. Okay, I just did something that wasn't the best way I should have played it. You have to be able to accept your mistakes. And you know, that can be hard if you grew up in a household where mistakes weren't tolerated, if either your parents that you spent a lot of time with were particularly hard on you, or your sports coaches or your teachers, that can make it difficult. And if you want, we can go into like your personal history if you want to find a root solution for this. But yeah, usually that's what's happening is you have a certain standard in your mind that doesn't allow for mistakes, and that standard's been breached, and it makes you upset. Well, I encourage you to have very high standards for yourself. It is important to acknowledge that everybody makes mistakes. The best players in the world that I work with, they make mistakes. But the people who ascend the fastest, who improve the fastest, when they make a mistake, they just, okay, and they just learn from it. Like, I would prefer not to do that again, so I'm going to learn the ins and outs of that spot, so I'm much less likely. Because as we talked about last week, your poker knowledge is like a tree. It's like there's loads and loads of spots, and every node on that tree is a spot, and you have a certain degree of confidence how well you know all the spots around that area. And spots that you get faced with less often, and for you as a new tournament player or relatively new to playing tournaments, you're going to have much more spots where your confidence is less high. And every time your confidence is less high, it's like you're rolling the dice, do I land a mistake? You know, so say you have, 80% confidence, and you have a 5-sided dice. Okay, every time you roll a 5, it's a mistake. You know what I mean? So you may know the spot pretty well, but not 100% well. And, obviously how you felt that day and how you showed up your session might play into the likelihood that you make a mistake on that specific occasion. But, sometimes mistakes are going to happen. And, maybe there's another 100-sided dice, and every time you roll 100, that mistake happens at the final table. And that can be pretty annoying, but it's still variance. Sometimes you're going to make mistakes. Sometimes it'll be for a lot of money. You're not going to get through a poker career without butchering a hand that was worth a lot of money at some point. And yeah, you're probably going to feel pretty shit about it. But, you'll feel better when you remind yourself that it happens to everybody and you just learn from it. And, don't expect perfection, expect growth. If you become a better poker player every single day that you play, and you have a better relationship to yourself where you can learn things more effectively, more efficiently, and with less self-inflicted poison, you will go far in life and in poker. But if you continue to waste time and bring down your energy and your emotional state with this self-inflicted poison, this harsh criticism, this voice in your head that's so angry that you could possibly make a mistake, how dare you, you will stunt your growth. Because if you're afraid to make mistakes, you'll be afraid to play creatively, you'll be afraid to implement what you know, you'll be afraid to change your game for the better or for the worse.